Portugal may be beautiful, but living in Portugal and visiting Portugal are two different things. Today, I'm going to share with you some things you might need to consider if you are thinking about relocating to Portugal. There are some immigration, financial, and everyday realities that you should think about if this is a country that you want to relocate to. I am not telling you that you should not move to Portugal. But what I am telling you is that I don't want you to be surprised about some of the things. So I want to give you a more realistic view of moving to Portugal. All right? So first, let's talk about the immigration, the actual visa process. Now, depending on the visa that you apply for, listen, this is not some easy, straightforward process. There are multiple steps. There's lots of paperwork. There is a huge financial commitment that you're going to make. You're going to have to prove that you're financially stable. So that's going to require a certain amount in your savings. Also, depending on what visa you're applying for, you're going to have to show proof that you are making that particular amount of money, or you do have that income, which is normally a requirement in all countries. But not only that, in order to apply, for instance, I applied for the D7 visa, and I had to already have an apartment lease prior to applying for the visa as a requirement for the visa. So basically, you're going to be paying to live in Portugal before you actually move to Portugal. And if you have a house or apartment somewhere else, you might be paying 2 months rent. And not only that, if your visa appointment or something gets delayed or canceled, you still are going to be paying for this apartment here in Portugal. So financially, you really need to be stable and make sure you have sufficient savings. One thing that surprised me, either it fell through the cracks, or I didn't read the fine line, or I didn't hear that part during my consultation with the relocation company. It was a required amount that I had to have in my savings in order to apply. And the amount was a lot more than I thought that was required. But luckily, I had it in there and it wasn't a big deal. But I was thinking, oh my gosh, what if I had, I don't know, done something else with that money or whatever? I would have not been able to apply for my residency. So don't just watch YouTube videos, or make sure you are completely clear on the requirements. Don't start looking for no apartment, because you need to be thinking about a whole lot of other things besides your basic monthly rent. All right? The visa that you apply for is only the beginning. My visa was only good for 4 months. That's a temporary visa. That gets you into Portugal. But then all that paperwork that you did is only for the temporary visa. Then you have to submit another application for your residency. And that's a whole nother set of paperwork, a whole nother bunch of documents. And on top of that, that particular appointment can be rescheduled. My appointment was rescheduled a couple of times. So basically what that meant was that my temporary residency status was over, meaning I was no longer staying in Portugal basically legal. I was like an overstay person. And think about what that does to you mentally, if you're used to following the rules and getting your process, getting your visas, and all of a sudden you're here in Portugal and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm an overstay. What's going to happen? So it's like, I know the immigration system is getting better. They are revamping the system and they're making it more streamlined online and things like that. But there still are significant delays. And that's something that you need to consider. It might be a possibility depending on when you apply, or it might be totally straightened out. But just know that things may not work according to how you think you're going to work. Another thing I wanted to talk about is, depending on the immigration delays, it can affect your travel. For instance, for me, my residency appointment was rescheduled twice. I had already had plans. I had arrived in February, and my initial appointment was in June. I had plans. I had already paid for a trip to Japan in November. I was going to leave Japan and go spend the holidays with my son in Thailand. Well, my appointment got rescheduled twice. I didn't actually go to my appointment until, was it October or November? Whatever it was, there was no way I was going to have a residency card by the holidays. And because I was an overstayer, did not have legal resident status in Portugal, you're kind of like rolling the dice if you try to travel somewhere else. Because other countries, if you're flying out of Portugal and you say, oh, here's my little email that says, my appointment is scheduled, they'll be like, this is not showing you have status. This is not showing you can travel to Portugal on a one-way ticket. So you might be denied boarding to get back into the country. And I heard, oh, if you fly to the States, just get a flight that comes directly back to Portugal. Once again, you're rolling the dice. So for my period, it might have been 15 or 16 months where I did not leave Portugal, because I was afraid that with my not having legal status in the country anymore, and my temporary visa was expired, that I was not going to be allowed back into the country. And I didn't want to take that chance. So I did what the majority of people did and just hunkered down in Portugal. So, and that was, I had to get a grip on those feelings, because I had this plan. I was going to be traveling throughout Europe, doing all these, exciting countries, little weekend getaway to Paris and going here and there. I was just going to be doing all of this stuff. And then the reality check, hey, you don't have your residency. You need to sit put. So I had to readjust my expectations, and I had to be flexible. And I started taking little trips throughout Portugal. And I made the best out of the situation. But did it put a damper on my travel plans? Absolutely, it did. So you might have to readjust your plans. And thankfully, the trip that I had booked, the Japan trip, they allowed me to move it to next year to an April Japan trip, because that was a fully paid for trip that I had paid for a year ago. So yeah, Portugal is not an easy country to relocate to. It's not. Administrative tasks can require multiple steps. Now, after you get your visa, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you got to do to complete your residency status in Portugal. You have to register in finances in the actual portal. You have to get your mobile CMD, digital mobile key, which allows you to sign into all of the government systems. You have to get a local doctor so you can register for the healthcare system, the local healthcare system. And even prior to that, prior to applying for your application, you have to get a bank account. You have to get a NIF, which is your Portuguese identification number. I mean, it's all of these steps to live here legally. I don't think it's a simple system. I guess because I was coming from another country when it was kind of once you do it, you do it. But this system that I'm actually here and living it, has multiple steps. And They're not always the easiest, simple steps. I remember there was a clinic, not even maybe 3 minutes from my apartment. And I was like, okay, great. I looked it up. Boom. Let me go here and apply for the health care. Went to the clinic, showed my residency card. Oh no, you're going to have to go to that clinic 15 minutes away. Yeah, but I live in this neighborhood. I know, but we're no longer accepting people. Your neighborhood now is at the is assigned to the clinic 15 minutes away. So I go to the clinic 15 minutes away, walk to the clinic. It was a beautiful day. Showed them my paperwork. No, you're not. We're not. Yeah, we were doing that, but we're not doing that anymore. We're no longer accepting people from your neighborhood. Okay, well, where do I go? I'm not sure, but go back to the other clinic because we're gonna be changing it again in about a week. So I was like, okay. And I just said, what can you do? Did I ever get signed up? I think I'm signed up. Yeah, I'm signed up. But here's another thing that I noticed, like some of the government systems, well, most of the majority of them, some of them you can translate some of the stuff in English, sometimes you can't. But if you have patience and you are using, Google Translate or whatever, a lot of the stuff you can actually get into the system and figure it out. So I have done several stuff that initially was like, oh my gosh, this is all in Portuguese. How can I do this? Because I don't know that enough of the language in order to get it done. But it's kind of like pluses and minuses. You want a system that has order to it, and you want there to be a process, and they do have processes. There is order, but sometimes you might not understand the logic, or you might be a little inconvenienced, but that's the process here. So I guess what I want to say is that just because you think something might work a certain way, you're going to have to get that out of your head, because things might not always make sense. But if this is the way they do it, if this is how you have to get it done, then you're just going to have to do it that way. I don't know if I went off on a tangent or what. Am I even still on topic? Who knows? Yes. Okay, so let's talk about the currency. Great. Now, so you might be saying, you look at an apartment that costs like 1,000 euros. Well, you're going to be ended up spending more than 1,000 euros because based on the currency rate, you might be paying 1,200 US dollars. So just know that the US dollar is not the strongest right now here in Europe. So you need to account for the additional money you're going to have to come out of your account based on the currency rate between the US dollar. So I'm not sure if people really think about that, long term, because that can add up. Like if you're spending an additional $300 a month per your rent, and you add that up a year, what is 300 times 12? You spent, is that 3,600? That can't be right. Yep, that's right. That's $3,600 that you have spent extra per year, per your expenses. So you're going to have to put that into account, that your cost of living is going to be higher than the euro bottom cost. It's going to be higher. Okay? And another thing, I know a lot of countries are doing this now. I don't know, I'm not sure, but here in Portugal, I think by law, they can charge up to 4 months your rent in order to move into that apartment. So it can be 2 months of advance rent and 2 months of deposit. And that's what I had to do to move into my apartment. I had to pay 2 months advance rent and I had to pay 2 months deposit. And now that I'm moving to my new apartment, I realized, once you go back and look at the contract, that I was paying like a month in advance. So for my last month that I'm moving out, I don't have to pay because I paid a month in advance. And so once I move out, then she's going to do an inspection, and then she's going to give me back my 2 months deposit. So I talked about being financially stable and having your finances in order. They really need to be in order here because you don't know if they're going to require 2 months deposit or 2 months total or up to 4 months. So you got to have that money ready and before you get your visa, because remember, you have to have your lease as part of your visa application. It has to be already signed. And something that I also want to talk about is apartments in Europe, apartments in Portugal are maybe going to be different to maybe what you're used to. Some might meet the same standards, some might look the same, but some might be different. It depends on what kind of building you're in. It depends on if you're in a modern building. You might be paying more for an apartment if you're closer to city center than on the outskirts. If you're closer to the tourist area, you might be paying more for less space. So you have to consider that as well. Depending on how old your building is, it might not be as insulated as a newer building, and maybe some of the newer buildings might not be that well insulated. The walls might be thinner. You might hear other neighbors and stuff like that. One thing about the building I'm living in, it's an older building. Yes, it is. But it's pretty solid. Does it get a little chilly in the winter? Yeah, it does. But is it like, oh my gosh, it's freezing? No, it is not, because this unit has been renovated and it has AC and heat. And what I found when I was looking for apartments, some apartments do not have AC. The older apartments, some of them don't have AC. And I remember when I was in language school, there was a lady who had an apartment, and we were like, it was the winter because we were like bundled up coming to school. And she was saying how cold she was and she couldn't get warm. And I was thinking, why are you not being able to get warm? And she's like, oh, my apartment doesn't have heat. And I was like, because it was cold. And I was like, what? She said, oh yeah, it's really cold in there. And I'm thinking, who would get an apartment that doesn't have heat? Especially in Porto, because Porto is cooler. So, but anyway, I guess the point that I'm trying to make before I went off on a tangent is that the apartments may be different than what you're used to. So you might have to, I'm not going to say you need to lower your expectations, because for me, I had to adjust my expectations. Because you're in charge of your own budget. So you can decide how much you want to pay. This is what you're going to be getting for this amount of money. Now, I'm spoiled because this space is very spacious. It's new, it's renovated. So I'm thinking I'm going to get that for the same price. Probably not. I've seen some newer places around the same price range, but they don't have the space, or they have these odd configurations. So I'm spoiled by this apartment when I first moved to Portugal, because this is a really good place, and it's going to be hard to find this in Portugal. I know I'm going to have to adjust my expectations for my next apartment in Portugal. I also want to talk about tourist season. If you're moving to a popular country that is a place that a lot of tourists come to, now when you visit, it might be exciting walking around, because you're a tourist, you're like in this lively atmosphere. Wow, this is so great. However, once you live in a popular tourist destination, living here every day is completely different in the middle of tourist season. I live very close to the center of Porto, and my normal little road little paved road that I walk to go to the supermarket. Without high season, it's like a nice little leisurely walk. High tourist season, you're like butting people, trying to get through the crowds. So you might have to adjust your schedule. I go in the mornings now when the store like just opens, because tourists are normally not out that early. If they are, they're lined up for a tour. They're not like, walking around. But you go midday or late in the afternoon when they're getting off the tours and they're trying to get snacks and stuff, the grocery store, the line is way down here, people all over the place. And you're thinking, I'm just trying to get home, But you chose to live in an area, you're living in an area where people want to come visit. So you're going to have to deal with the crowds in high tourist season. That's something you're going to have to get adjusted to, if that's what you choose to do. And another thing I want to talk about is building community may take a little more effort from you. Depending on where you live in Portugal, a lot of places have expat groups. They have planned events that they're having every month. There's all sorts of ways to meet people. But attending a large expat event does not necessarily mean you're going to meet or connect with people, especially the first time. It might take going more than once. You might have to just connect with someone organically. I met my good friend Beverly. I was walking through Bilal Market, which is one of it's kind of like a touristy market that tourists flock to, but it's like a big fruit, vegetable, fish, all kinds of meat market in the center of Porto. But it is also where a lot of locals shop for like veggies and stuff like that. So, you go early in the morning to beat the tourist crowds. But I forgot why I was there, but I was walking, I saw a group of black women, and I approached them. And I said, hi, do you live here in Porto? And the other ladies were like, no, I'm visiting. And Beverly was like, oh, I live here. And we immediately started chatting. We exchanged numbers. We met for lunch. And we've been friends since. So I could have easily saw them and maybe just waved and kept on walking. So sometimes you have to put yourself out there. You have to get through the little uncomfortable part in order to make connections. And even if you go to an event, you might have to put yourself out there at the event. You might have to introduce yourself. You might have to purposely try to sit by someone so you can have some sort of conversation. But just don't expect, just because you move to a new country, you're going to be surrounded by all of these people and have like this large list of things to do and events to attend. Because some places are more established than others as far as expat events. You might have to start your own. You might have to be the one who is initiating for people to do things. But I just want to say that it might take a little effort on your part. So don't think just because there's an expat group in a particular part of Portugal that you're going to be able to move with no effort and boom, have 10 friends, if that's what you want to do. Some places are busier than others. Some places are not as active as others. So make sure you do your due diligence, do your research, and decide if that's the kind of lifestyle or that's the kind of community that you want. And just because you meet someone in an expat group doesn't necessarily mean you guys are going to mesh. Your personalities might not that they clash, but you may find that, hey, I'm not sure if I really want to get to know her any more than that. I'm not sure if we're really going to be hanging out. I'm not sure if I want to go to lunch with her. So just because you guys are expats does not mean you're going to be bosom buddies. People are people, so keep that in mind. All right? Portugal may still be the right country for you, but don't choose it based on cost of living videos, highlight reels, or what someone else is saying about Portugal. You're going to have to think about the financial commitment, the immigration situation, the everyday reality, and decide if Portugal is the place, if this is going to give you the life that you want to create. Think about your everyday living and if this is going to be the right fit for you. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. And do me a favor and hit the like, because it doesn't cost a thing, but it's a good way to help support my channel, and it helps YouTube know that I am talking about things that people want to hear. All right, so until the next time, ciao, ciao.